Blog Talk Radio.
Enlightenment Evolution Network presents the Enlightenment Evolution Hour with your host, Rob Gauthier. Hey everybody, this is the Enlightenment Evolution Hour with your host, Rob Gauthier. Tonight we've got a very, very special night with a very special guest. We have David Sereda with us tonight, and he'll be talking with us, taking questions and calls. 35 years, David Sereda has been practicing all sorts of wonderful stuff. He's been practicing in-depth meditation with breathing, harmonic ascension tones, deep relaxation, awareness, heart-centeredness, illumination of the mind and soul, quantum physics in the way that love affects our own subconscious and consciousness, and how it affects our ascensional process in growing into our hearts. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guest tonight. And like I said, we will be taking calls tonight. If you would like to call and be a part of this conversation, you can call area code 347-308-8788, or you can sign in for a free Blog Talk Radio account. Go to the link on the Facebook page, the Enlightenment Evolution Hour or the Enlightenment Evolution Network. Click on the link. You could sign in there. I'm going to be turning my chat on too, so that everyone will have the chance to send questions through the text or in chat. And by doing that, just go to Facebook, click on the link, and you're there. Before we get to David, and I'm anxiously waiting to talk to him, as I know all of you are, what I want to share with all of you is something that's new with the network. We have always had the Enlightenment Evolution Network YouTube page with shows and archives, but each host had a responsibility to do their own, and so many of us were so busy with all of the other work that we were doing, we couldn't do it. But we've got a special friend of the Enlightenment Evolution Network, Jessica Holman, who is kicking it right in the butt, making all of these videos available for all of you. Within a day or two of the launching, it will be on YouTube, so keep your eyes out on YouTube. You will get 100% live updates on all the shows via YouTube, so it will be exciting. It will be magnificent. We've also got a few announcements later down the road. Right before we go to our top of the hour break, we will have a special announcement for TrebChanneling.com. But I would like, before anything else, to get to my special guest, David Sereda. And I believe he is with us. David, are you there with us?
Yeah, Rob. Thank you for having me on your show tonight.
Oh, well, thank you for coming. Like I said, longtime fan of yours. I really enjoyed the work about 7 or 8 years ago when I first started really waking up. Before I started doing my work, I really enjoyed. I watched some of your very, early to me, it was the quantum voices and all those videos that you did when it related to quantum physics. So I'm really excited to have you on. Before we get to any talking, for those of you or those of our listeners who might not have heard of you, can you give us an explanation of who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are today, your journey, and in whatever way you feel is important to tell us?
Well, I've got to say first that, when I was born in 1961 in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and my dad and mom moved us to Berkeley, California in about 1964. And, with 4 brothers growing up in the Bay Area, my dad was pursuing a degree in psychology. And I remember actually my baptism, which is only 4 weeks old, my father told me, where I was picked up in the back of the car in a gravel parking lot at a church, a Catholic church in Alberta, Canada. And I remember looking at the priest who was baptizing me, and I can still see his face, his nervousness and just the shape of his face. And I looked at him and I said, you're not really connected to God. you're just doing this as a ritual, but you don't really feel the presence of God. It's just, you're just doing this. And I was totally aware of that. And at that age, and I couldn't, of course, at that age, use language, but that would be the tone that would set my life, that I didn't just want rituals in my life. I wanted to experience God, if there was a way to do it, and meet God. And I would do anything it took to meet God and experience God, regardless of what it would require of me. And I did that. And I started meditating every day by the time I was 18. And I never stopped, doing a lot of different techniques, from yoga to Tai Chi to practicing meditation every single day, different breathing meditations, and studying with different yoga teachers from India, and studying world religions all of my life. And I eventually, doing very intensive meditations. I mean, I'm meditating sometimes, in my life, not even at retreats, 4 to 6 hours a day in sitting cross-legged position. I mean, not all straight 6 hours in a row, but by the end of the day, that's how many hours I would put in. And when I got out of high school, I decided I wanted to be a tree planter, because I wanted to do something for the planet and something that would bring me closer to the experience of God. So I did plant over 1.3 million trees over 22 years. And believe me, they work you like slaves out there. So you're planting, 1,500, anywhere from 700 to 2,000 trees a day or more, depending on the territory.
Wow.
So it's a real form of labor abuse. I mean, your body gets destroyed doing it, and it's very low pay considering where you are. And so I did that, but that is what it took for me to get deeply connected so that I could have an experience. In 1986, December 22nd and 23rd would be the most unbelievably powerful, days of my whole life. Prior to that, I'd done some Buddhist retreats where you're sitting 12 hours a day, and I went into what is known as the Samadhi or holy state. There are actually, in the Buddhist Dhammapada, there are 7 stages of the Samadhi or illuminated state of being, and those stages took Buddha 400 lifetimes to perfect the first 6. And the nirvana begins at the 7th. This is in the Buddhist Lankavatara Sutra, for those of you who want to check. And in mystic Christianity, you basically have the same thing. In the Gnostic Gospels, they were known as the chrisms, that the baptism, this is in the Gospel of Philip, where Jesus says that you're not saved just by believing, but the baptism is only an initiation, but you need to attain the chrisms, and there are multiple levels of the chrism, or a Christ-lighted consciousness. And in Hinduism, it's the same. They just have different names. In Buddhism, they call it jhana, or absorption. In India, they call it samadhi. In Japan, they call it satori. And what ends up happening in that state, in this 10-day, this Buddhist Vipassana, where you're meditating 12 hours a day, it was actually only a 3-day retreat that my father held, is after enormous pain, just staring at the body, and your legs are burning, and your legs hurt, and your back hurts, and you're like, what is this meditation? Sitting there staring at my mind jumping around. And what happens with focusing on sensations in the body, like pain, is pain makes you be here right now. It's a very extremely loud sensation in the body, and it's very irritating. But eventually you master the ability to sit still for very long periods of time, and the pain loses its power over you. But in the beginning, a lot of people are deterred from meditation because of the pain. But pain is one method among many that I've learned in 35 years of daily practice, because if you sit more than 15 minutes, you're going to start to get some pain. The pain is in the knees and the back, and it can be a distraction, but if you stay with it, you just stay focused where the pain wants you to be. It only wants you to be here now. Like Ram Dass said, it wants you to be here now. It won't let you be in the past. It won't let you be in the future. And the worse the pain gets, the more it's going to bring you here. And that's one of the reasons we suffer naturally and we suffer unnaturally. I mean, so natural suffering would be, pain from an injury or, hurting yourself, or even an emotional pain can be very, very loud and obvious in the body. And emotions can be very purging and cleansing at the same time as they are very, very painful. But we suffer nonetheless, and we also eventually, through suffering, develop compassion when we see others suffer. That compassion is the beginning of breaking down the boundaries of the small self, which is a very small, luminous field of awareness about, maybe 10 or 20 feet around the body, which is not very big. And that selfish, small self is where most people reside in our culture. Most. I'm not saying all, but most. And that's generally all they care about is their own sense of self-satisfaction. But what happens with compassion for others is you suddenly break the yoke of the surrounding ego. Ego is not, it's not like a puffing up of the self, and the ego is this small, limited sphere of awareness. So it doesn't necessarily disappear because you're humble or anything like that. And what ends up happening in Samadhi is the boundary, the barrier, which is this force field that surrounds you, cracks open, and most of your consciousness appears to go beyond the body, way beyond the body. And you enter this unified field consciousness, which you can call God consciousness, or you can just not even label it and just feel it. And you suddenly feel that everything is so illuminated and so beautiful and so far out and so incredible, it doesn't matter where you look. It's like you're seeing everything for the first time. And I'm not talking about looking at a rose and enjoying its beauty for a couple of minutes. I'm talking about if you were looking at concrete, it would blow your mind in this state. If you were looking at dust, if you were looking at ashes, if you were looking at a rose, it probably wouldn't make that much difference. Because God is so fully present in the here and now. Jesus said in the Gospel of Thomas, split a piece of wood and I am there. And I make that joke every morning when I'm splitting wood. I'm going to go out and split wood and I'm going to see Jesus in the wood. But you're not seeing his form. It's the consciousness. It's the Christ consciousness. You can call it that, or you can just call it the pure essence of being. It's actually everywhere. And there's so much bliss and peace and ecstasy and beauty and unnameable qualities in this state that is why people work so hard at yoga, asana yoga, to prepare themselves to eventually learn how to sit for long periods of time to eventually have this experience. But over the years, I found, in studying with a lot of different Indian mystics and gurus, that a lot of the students weren't really getting it because a lot of the Eastern ideas were too strict and uptight and were absolutely unnecessary, I found, in the breadth of my 35 years of daily practice and discovering different natural transpersonal techniques. So in 1986, I had an experience, December 22nd, which is the end of the sun's journey, the Earth's journey around the sun for the year, and it's just hanging on the end of the ellipse, for those few days before the new sun emerges on the 24th or 25th of December. I didn't know that then, but at about 4:15 in the afternoon, my legs were shaking, my knees were shaking, and I felt my sense of self cracking, like a giant fissure had just cracked me open, and I was so vulnerable, like a shaking leaf in the wind. I felt like I was dying, but I wasn't dying, but I'm like, oh my God, I think I was 27 years old at that time. I said, I got to lie down. Something's terribly wrong. And I lie down, and instantly I go into this very lucid vision it's like I'm out of body, and I'm actually in this very poor shack of a house in the American Southwest outside of Taos, New Mexico. I knew exactly where I was, and there I was in Vancouver, Canada, in the pouring rain that day. And there's an old man who's dead. He looks like he's dead, and there's peeled wallpaper and pots and pans and, missing beams in the walls. And there's two women with long, dark hair wearing all white praying over his dead body. And the old man gets up, and he's not dead, and he says to me, "Do you want to see an angel?" And I said, "Why, yes." And the split second I said yes, like a clap of the loudest thunder, this blinding white light pours down from the vision from above, and I hear this strobing, pulsing, harmonic sound of angels' voices, so beautiful and so powerful. It's as if they were literally singing from the Godhead, from the very, very source of God. And I was on my bed. I was fully aware, and it was so loud you would literally go deaf if you used your human ears to hear the sound of the angels. It was like a pulsing, rumbling thunder, and in between the pulses, you could hear like the angels' voices were strobing. And my body was getting paralyzed, piece by piece. First, it was my lower legs, then it moved into my hips. And as my body got paralyzed, which is known as sleep paralysis, but yet I'm aware, because I can open my eyes, and the sound of the angels doesn't stop, the light doesn't stop. And then all of a sudden it's moving up my spine, this is known as Kundalini in the Far East. And it paralyzes my arms. I could not move my arms if I tried. And there is no bliss, there's no ecstasy, there's this blinding light and the sounds of angels singing. And I said, you just trust. This is obviously God. Just relax into the experience. I mean, I can't describe how loud the angels' voices are and how beautiful the sounds of their voices are. It would make any, like Handel's Messiah, seem utterly boring by comparison in the sound, like meaningless, insignificant. The human angelic, interpretation is utterly insignificant. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony is just pale in comparison to what I'm hearing. And I collapse, and my arms are paralyzed, and my neck is paralyzed, and when it moves past my neck, I have no ability to think anymore. I'm no longer in control of the thinking process. And that was scary. But the moment I let go and trusted, there was an explosion of ecstasy, like a million, literally like a supernova. I mean, enormous explosion of light in my belly, and it immediately swept me out of my body so fast, zooming above the rain clouds. I get above the clouds and above planet Earth, and I see 100,000 or more of these silvery gray ego cocoons and blinding light on the other side of it. And there's a being of white light, an angel off to my left side, communicating with me. And I look at them and I go, these are people who have just died on the planet. They're the souls of the deceased. And as I get close to their silvery gray cocoons, I can see there's movies going on in each one of them. And the angel tells me that the silvery gray screen it's like a movie screen. If you look at a really good movie screen, it's like a silvery white. This is more silvery gray. And they're going through their life reviews. Every single one of them is seeing the movies of their life reviews all at the same time. And as I get near them, there's so much light coming from the first heaven that I'm in, and so much love and so much ecstasy and peace and beauty. And the quality, and the angel singing is above. You can see the source of the light is way, way above us. And the angel says to me, as I get close to them, they start to shake and tremor, just like I did. But their response to the presence of God on the other side is fear, because they're not ready to be opened. They want to remain in control. The ego wants to be in control, and the angel said they're not ready. They're too afraid. They're just going to go through their life review, and they're going to reincarnate in their appropriate places, depending on how they live their lives. And the angel said, you have to go now. So I leave, and we go zooming towards the edge of the first heaven. And the angel tells me there's millions of paradise planets within this heaven. Everybody in the first heaven, you still have a body. It's very luminous. It's not blindingly bright, but the ecstasy levels there are about 100 times better than the best ecstasy possible for a human being, a normal human being. And it's sustained with this perfect peace. And there are other qualities that you just can't name. And I reach this membrane where the ecstasy starts to crush me. It becomes impossible for that first paradise body to withstand that much ecstasy. So I go through the membrane, I pop out the other side, I'm in the second heaven, and the ecstasy multiplies 1,000,000-fold, literally 1,000,000 times more. But that new paradise body can handle it because it's more harmonically tuned than the first paradise body. And we're actually moving towards the middle of the Milky Way galaxy. I am seeing this. And the angel tells me there's millions of paradise planets in this heaven. And then we go through another membrane, and I go to the third heaven. And the third heaven is the end. It's the last heaven where you still have human form, because when you go into the fourth, the levels of God consciousness are so massive, you become the size of a sun. You literally, as a being, become that size. And then I went into the fifth, which is utterly unspeakable. You start disappearing into fields of light. The levels of ecstasy and love and peace and power and beauty and wisdom and graces. The graces begin at the edge of the fourth and the fifth. They make all previous qualities of love and ecstasy seem insignificant. Love and ecstasy are no longer significant at the fourth and the fifth. And I went through the sixth, and I approached the seventh, which is unspeakable. Now, this is, in the beginning, Buddha, it took him 400 lifetimes to perfect 1 through 6. And a bodhisattva withholds the ability to go into the seventh, because in the seventh you become extinguished as an individual consciousness point that can no longer appear to others for the sake of their being. You literally disappear into the God force. But it's so restful and so fulfilling on such a deep spiritual level that many souls choose to go into nirvana in the Buddhist terminology, or extinction, which is the seventh heaven in Christianity. But there's an eighth and a ninth, which I didn't pierce the seventh. I was right at its doorstep. And it's so massive what enlightenment is. It's so much bigger than anybody could possibly imagine. It's at those levels, even at the fourth level. It's not even possible to understand this until you experience it. But what I did come back with, because I went to India and I met the Dalai Lama, and I found the Buddhist Lankavatara Sutra where it describes the 7 levels, and it describes the 8th and the 9th also, that eventually bodhisattvas attain the 8th and the 9th, which are extremely, extremely high levels of realization. Dante Alighieri probably wrote the best descriptions of what it's like poetically to go through 1 through 9. He's been all the way to the 9th. And anybody who reaches the 7th gains huge supernatural powers. Buddha said that's the only permanent place. Like 1 through 6, you can visit those states and then you go right back to suffering and ordinary human consciousness. Well, after I went through them, I went through them 2 days in a row, actually, December 22nd and the 23rd. 2 days in a row, I went through all of them. I had a choice to go through the 7th, and I chose not to, not because I wanted to be a bodhisattva, but because I knew that if I crossed, I could never come back. And I wanted to tell people that this spiritual path is more valuable and more worth it than anything you'll ever do in your life. And the pursuit of money and power is for the dogs compared to this. Now, you can harmonize the path of money and career with this, but you cannot compromise how you make it with money and power to humiliate yourself and your chances to ever go here where I'm talking about. So the people who don't have integrity with money and power, they're not going anywhere near these places because they just don't have the right resonance in their own consciousness to ever go there. But see, our culture is so much, our chakras are so aligned to money and power, and we look up to people with money and power way more than we look up to people who have ever attained anything like this. But when I decided to come back, I didn't know it was going to take me my whole life practicing meditation and studying with different gurus to eventually find out what really works to get people into these states. And in the end, I find an ancient music scale that has been lost for thousands of years that Jesus taught in the Gospel of the Egyptians, these 7 sacred tones that you intone with your voice to increase your vibrational rate. But you have to tone to perfect master tones that you need to know what they are. Well, I did all this math in the Great Pyramid years ago, and I decoded this scale that is so ancient and so pure. And there's a video of it on Vimeo called The Lost Scale. You just Google video in Vimeo, just Google David Sereda, The Lost Scale, and you'll find it. And you'll see...
David, before we get into that scale, because that scale is a big thing, and there's a lot of things in there, before we get to that part, I want to ask you about these levels of heaven that you experience, these different levels. As you're going through each one, a lot of what you're describing is what a lot of people in the metaphysical or New Age community, a lot how certain channeled entities that come through express the terminology densities or even dimensions. They're explaining it very similar to this, how in one level you are more solid, more physical. There are plenty of places that have enlightenment, and then the next harmonic level or density or dimension would be less physical with more connection to Creator. Have you ever found a parallel in any of those types of teachings compared to what you perceived and how you did?
Well, it's very similar, except for what's missing in the language is what you feel there is unimaginable, expanded, perfectly sustained ecstasy. It's not like an adrenaline-based ecstasy where you eventually get the jitters and want to calm down. This ecstasy is so pure that, and it's so sustained by peace, and it's so balanced by harmonics that, and so many other qualities that I don't know how to name, that it's perfect. So you're right, it's more dense. Here it's incredibly dense, but the more the boundaries of the egg dissolve, the less dense your experience of reality is. In fact, you're in a body. Because today, I'm 53 years old. I can go into the Samadhi state almost every other night when I meditate. It's taken me my whole life to be able to do it and find out what is the secret to really getting there. And even though you're in the body, you're so high, there's so much bliss, you don't really experience the density the way you did when you're not in this state.
Well, sure. And one thing I can attest for people who've never seen your picture, people who've never seen any of the videos or movies that you've done, I can say from my own perception that being a man who is over 50 years old, you look very young. When I first had seen your newer pictures, I thought this has to be one of his older pictures. He's got to be, my age, close to the mid-30s, So,
most people seem to guess me there still, but I went through phases where, because I did so much tree planting and extreme skiing, and I used to skydive, that I had a lot of pain in my joints and my body. But now pain, it just doesn't bother me that much anymore. It doesn't have the hold on me that it used to have.
Well, sure. So, and for those of you who are just tuning in, I want to tell you guys, this is the Enlightenment Evolution Hour with your host, Rob Gauthier. We have David Sereda, who is here talking about his experiences through meditation, 35 years of mastering multiple levels of meditation, multiple kinds of meditation. And you were just getting into talking about the special tones that you can go through, the ascensional tones that actually help people get through that, and how you figured those out inside the Great Pyramid. If you'd continue on your story there, I didn't want to cut you off, but I had to get it while it was fresh in my mind and relevant at that time. So.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Well, see, what ends up happening is, like, when you study with all these yoga masters from India, and they have a very nice culture built around yoga and meditation. And when you go to India, there's very few illuminated people. I mean, it's an absolutely insane every man and woman for himself society, like just about anywhere else you go. So finding illuminated people there isn't easy, and there's a lot of fakes, taking advantage of people because people are very, gullible. They don't really know how to perceive that presence very well, even when it is coming from an authentic person. But the whole time I was in India, I only saw one or two really illuminated people. But what ends up happening is you realize that there's a lot of language barriers in our culture and the interpretation of Far Eastern ideas. And there's a lot of meditation teachers who come here and tell you to be celibate, and many of them end up sleeping with the students, themselves. So I found with 8 years of celibacy, I went through another period in 2004 where Jesus Christ appeared to me in a blinding light like 1,000 suns. He appeared to me 3 times, and the Virgin Mary about 5 times, and Mary Magdalene about 3 times. And I went through a period where when Christ appeared to me, within days I could see the dead, and I could see star beings and interplanetary beings with my eyes open, with every bit of detail that you see a physical person with your own eyes, meaning the fabric, the clothes they're wearing, everything. Their feet do not touch the earth when they're around me. Some of them are floating up pretty high in the physical space when I've seen them. But what I'm going to tell you is that doing very strict austerities that make you unhappy is not going to bring you closer to these states of consciousness. That being completely human in every way, I mean, I'm a married man now and I have a 4-year-old daughter, it makes no difference whether you're celibate or not. What makes the difference is how sincere your heart is on everything you do in your life, from how much you love your relationship, how much you love your children, if you have them, and how much you love animals and people, and how much you love the earth. How much your heart can plug in is 1,000,000 times more important than whether you're celibate or not. It makes no difference at all. In fact, now with this new gospel out, there's a book coming out that proves that Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene and had children. And, of course, the church always, says, oh, those aren't real, even though they're 1,500 years old and this gospel's in Aramaic. They basically want you to believe that you're supposed to go to a Catholic monastery and wear a costume, a black and white costume, that Jesus never invented, that his disciples never invented for women, but somehow we invented. And nuns beat children. They beat them. And we know this because we have plenty of reports of enormous discoveries inside monasteries where there's beatings, and there's so much emphasis on suffering and suffering and suffering for God. And I can tell you that I've met Christ 3 times, and I've met the Virgin Mary, and I've met Mary Magdalene, and there's nothing more incredible than meeting Jesus. Being in heaven is still tiny compared to meeting him. It's indescribable what it's like to actually meet him. And I've seen him right in front of me with my eyes open, and I've had him take me out of body into the high heaven states. But in the end, you have to be able to do it yourself. You see, in the Gospel of Philip, which is a real gospel, it's just the church that says it isn't real, It's as old as any of the other ones. Jesus says, if you don't attain the resurrection when you live, when you die, you'll receive nothing. And that's very Buddhistic. It's very, very authentic to the ancient religions of the world, that you can't just believe and then live a crazy life and think you're going there to live in this beautiful, pristine state of ecstasy and love when your heart isn't even open. So it basically just confirms that. You have to attain your own realization. What you feel right now in your life is who you are. That's the extent of your ability to perceive. You know, when I got my heart badly broken, when my mom left all of us, my brothers and I, when I was 12 years old, it shut down my heart chakra so bad. I was in so much pain. I was as depressed as anybody. I couldn't feel a thing. I couldn't feel anything but adrenaline and adrenaline-based sports and, you know, pursuing things that guys pursue, you know, relationships, girls, all of it. And none of that could compare in even a grain of sand. The highest high I've ever had skydiving or extreme skiing and flying off cliffs and ripping through moguls at 35 miles an hour doesn't compare to meditation. But in order to meditate effectively, you have to get in deep into your heart. And what I found when I discovered the lost scale, this lost music scale, why Jesus taught these 7 sacred tones in the Gospel of the Egyptians, which you can Google, is because these perfect tones that come from a very ancient source are so pure that when you sing to them, as people are doing in my online course, which is not time-sensitive, this course is going on all the time. People can start whenever they want. It's a 6-month course where you're going to learn to resonate into the here and now, vibrate, harmonize yourself into the here and now by using breath and tone work to activate your inner chakras and get your heart to open. Because perfect harmonic resonance is what love really is. You just need to vibrate and tone for a while until you eventually learn how to feel this on an incredibly deep level. I mean, even if you're a very good, loving person today, can you go into supreme states of expanded ecstasy on a regular basis? And can you feel the presence of God in everything you look at, including concrete? Because if you can do it looking at a rose, I'm not very impressed, but if you can do it looking at concrete, that's impressive.
Yeah, that's a special feat.
Yeah, because it's not easy to do, because God is actually in the concrete. You know, Jesus said, He's in it. God's presence is in every single atom. God never left us. We left God, and that's what ended up happening, is we left God. So, you know, that's been my life. I mean, I'm known for, you know, UFOs, zero-point energy research, anti-gravity, and those things, because my interest in outer space and traveling to other star systems is, I really think that there's no hurry to reach the 7th level of consciousness in nirvana, that you should enjoy the entire journey. And it's a awfully long journey to get to those levels of consciousness. And
well, sure.
even if you reach the first level of clear light consciousness, or the chrism in Christianity, you'll be immensely happy. Immensely, if you can just do that in your lifetime.
Well, absolutely. And for those of you who are just joining us, this is the Enlightenment Evolution Hour with your host, Rob Gauthier. Special guest, David Sereda, who's been talking about a myriad of things. We're talking about meditation, how that has expanded your life, your interactions with not just the Christ consciousness, but Christ entity himself, your journey through these layers of heaven, and also your energetic journey through meditations. We will be taking calls, too, this evening. If you would like to call in and ask a question, David, feel free to call area code 347-308-8788, or you can go to Blog Talk Radio, or the Enlightenment Evolution Hour Facebook page. Go to the link, sign in free for Blog Talk. You can call through Skype, or you can go to the message board, the chat room, and put your question there. Now, for me, I did meditation for a long time, not nearly as long as you have. I've only been doing meditation for probably about 8 years, and I was able to open myself up pretty quickly. I was able to astral project. I was able to leave my body. I was able to see higher harmonic levels, and in my ability to do that, the one thing that I found that I had in common with you was continuous meditation all the time. I would end up meditating sometimes on upwards to 4 or 5 hours per day, plus when I have a kid who has special needs, so I was always having to take care of him and support him and do all the things that are necessary for him. So when I wasn't able to be in a meditation state, I was closing my eyes, feeling vibrations. And I ran across one of your videos. It was the Cosmic Consciousness video, the one where you had talked about consciousness and how that they are finding through quantum physics that consciousness can go to the 10th power of light speed, and how we're able to transmit telepathic signals from here to the next galaxy in a matter of seconds. When you started getting into that quantum mechanics, because this is something that's always fascinated me, what was the number one truth that you found that linked science to the spiritual concepts that you knew were true in your heart but couldn't prove it until then?
Well, it's a combination of wanting to prove it, that you're really having this experience that is real, and also wanting to know how things work so you can repeat the process and have the experience again. You know, sometimes earlier in my meditation practice, I would be able to go into the Samadhi state, and when it ended, the next day I'd retrace my footsteps and I couldn't go back, and then I'd retrace them again and I couldn't go back. It wasn't that easy. It's like something was missing. Well, how did I do it? I don't know what I'm doing any different, but I'm not getting into that state. And that's the point of science. See, science wants to know how things work, so if you turn on the switch, the light bulb comes on every time, or the computer works every time, and sometimes, you know, you get the spinning ball and it crashes. So the idea is to learn how to operate yourself that effectively, your own self. How do you get to heaven effectively and reach states of heavenly consciousness effectively, and hopefully get to the point where you can do it every day? And you do. You eventually learn how to do it almost every day, get into these amazing states, and life becomes more and more wonderful, even while all this suffering and chaos is going on all over the world. And so that's what I'm teaching people to do now, is to learn how to do it. And it doesn't require you... See, God doesn't reward you in a rewards program the way a parent would. If you're good, you get the cookie, and if you're not, you don't. It's really always there. The presence of God and the reward is all around us, but we don't feel it because we're heavy and dense, and we don't forgive. We hold on to stuff, and holding on to stuff makes you heavier and heavier and more dense. And there are some pretty horrible things that happen to people that are highly unjust and completely unfair. But if you hang on to resentment about the fact that that happened to you, you're in trouble. And that may not sound like the universe is fair, but one time the Virgin Mary appeared to me when I was living in Los Angeles, and I thought, you know, I was in love with this woman, but I really wasn't. And she told me, David, it doesn't matter how unfair it is that you are not getting the relationship that you want or that you deserve, but you just have to forgive and let go of everything that's ever happened to you that's unfair in your life to get into heaven. And you can get into heaven in the here and now or when you die. But most people who become saints, like Saint Teresa of Avila, said in the beginning of her path, when Christ appeared to her in person, she was able to be in that state when he was with her, but when he left her, she wasn't able to be in that state. It took her entire life to transcend the 7 levels of the interior castle. She had 7 levels, just like, Buddha does. There's actually 9, but the 8th and the 9th and the 10th are actually very secluded and for extremely rare masters. But so, in the end of her life, she said, it won't make any difference when I die. God is so fully present, heaven is so fully present here and now, it won't change when I die. She actually said that, and that's what starts to happen, is you wonder why. So you may think, Jesus said to me, these are called the terrible ironies, is that a person might do everything by the book perfectly, but they don't know how to feel. Yet they're doing everything perfectly that by the book. And then he said there are people who do so many wrong things, they make so many mistakes, but in the end, they forgive themselves and others, and they get it, and they learn how to feel love. And love, see, love is what binds you to the light. It's what binds you to heaven's light. So human love, even though it's imperfect, and it was scorned by St. Teresa of Avila's peers, that human love was full of thorns, yes, it is, but it's still love. It comes and goes, and you feel it, and then you don't feel it with this person, but then you feel it again, and then you don't feel it again. Eventually, it matures, and it turns into supreme God love. And the love in God is what pulls you into the light. And the light has much higher qualities than love, much, much higher. There's tremendous love in the beginning, in the first few heavens, but eventually you transcend that into higher vibrational levels of the ecstasy and the graces. The graces will dwarf all of the perception of love. The love never goes away. It's always part of the light. But for humans, it's the first ray that we see when the light comes for us, is the love. So our human love is so important in our spiritual progress. You don't become a non-attached person, because non-attachment in Buddhism means neither clinging nor aversion. It means being in the light. It's a very, very advanced state, but you don't want to turn your back on love. You don't want to turn your back on compassion, and you don't want to neglect human imperfect love in relationships, as frustrating as it can be at times. But because that human imperfect love will mature, and it's the only thing you have that can eventually connect you into heaven's light. It's the only thing that can save you. So if you turn down human love for false loves, if you don't marry a person out of love, Jesus told me this, then that's not marriage, because a marriage is two becoming one in a state of love and union, and it's celebrated as a physical marriage in the aftermath of the love. But if they're not marrying for love, that's not a marriage. And the sin part of that is, sin just means you're still living in ignorance. You're not living in love. As soon as you find the right person who magically triggers a state of love for you, that is what is going to cause you to grow. And the meditation and the harmonic tones are going to teach you how to resonate into way, way higher levels of love than you could possibly do on your own without it. And music, when it was born in ancient Greece and ancient Egypt, it gave birth to scales that we would tune our instruments to, and if those scales were perfect, music could accelerate our consciousness. But what ends up happening in the music story is, this is what we know today, that in the Greek mythology, the god Apollo and his brother Hermes create the lyre, which is the harp, or known as kithara in ancient Greek. And a student of Apollo's and Hermes named Orpheus takes the lyre, he's given the lyre by Apollo, and he goes to Egypt and he finds a music scale superior to the Greek, and he comes back and he's playing music on a level that tames the savage beast, puts people into ultra-high states of consciousness. He's even able to tame spirits that are in more confused astral planes and puts them into light. And out of jealousy, he's beheaded, and there's many stories of who beheads him. But we know that he went to Egypt to find the scale. And this is what's interesting, because the next person who comes along is Pythagoras, and Pythagoras also goes to Egypt, and he's really the father of philosophy, the word philosophy, and his mystery school is the mystery of the number 10, or 10 levels, or 10 base points. In the tetrachus, the pyramidal tetrachus, there are 10 points on the pyramid. And eventually a 10-tone Greek music scale is born. And that scale, I have my hands on the numbers of the frequencies of the tones, is utterly perfect. But then somehow we come along to the modern 7 tones, A, B, C, D, F, G on a piano. And with the flats and the sharps, we have 12 tones. But when you play, if you go to my video on Vimeo, The Lost Scale, or just write me, David Sereda, at outlook.com, Sereda, and I'll send you a link to it. When you distortion test tones, you stack all the tones on top of each other, one at a time, in a tone generator, and you can hear our music scale distorts. And the distortion is quite bad at a certain point. And you realize, oh my God, we're making music to a distorted scale that is not harmonic, and when waves are not harmonic, they actually are crashing into each other, and you're not experiencing a rising of the spiritual energy going from the base of the spine all the way to the illuminated parts of the upper regions of the body, the third eye and the crown chakra, and then there's 3 more crown chakras above the 7th. So there's actually 10 chakras. But we made 7 chakras because we only had a 7-tone music scale. But even the 7 tones, A, B, C, D, F, G, also distort, in which you can see in the video. And then there's this very famous solfeggio scale, and the solfeggio scale is definitely better. There are 9 tones in the solfeggio scale. There's actually 6, and the 6 are utterly perfect. They do not distort. But there's not enough tones in 6 to get you to the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th chakras. There's only enough tones to keep you inside of the body and only up to the opening of the third eye. But when you add 3 more solfeggios to the bottom, which gives you 9, they distort on the 4th and 5th note. That's where the distortion starts. So distortion won't let your Kundalini rise. So what did Pythagoras know, and why did this ancient Greek scale get lost? This is where it gets amazing. Well, in Greek, they have a number, a numerological value for every word in their language. And the number for Kithara, which is the earliest lyre or harp, was 5-1. And when I saw that, I went, oh my God, because I had decoded all the frequencies in the Great Pyramid. And I saw that when I took the square wave of the capstone base of the Great Pyramid and took the speed of light divided by that, because an electromagnetic square wave was oscillating around the base of the peak, I got 5.151 megahertz square, which means the builder of the pyramid had to know the speed of light to calculate where to cut the pyramid off at the top to produce a frequency equal to its slope angle, because the slope angle of the pyramid is 51 degrees and 51 minutes, which is 6 base math in degrees, minutes, and seconds, which is just under 52 degrees in 10 base math. So that's the same number. You would have to know the speed of light at the time the pyramids were built to know that its frequency at the capstone was 5151 megahertz square. I went, that's impossible. This is the first case to prove whoever built the pyramids was far more advanced than a Stone Age civilization, because we didn't know the speed of light until 1972. We didn't know it perfectly until... So,
and I have a question for you, David. We're getting ready to come around the top of the hour break. We've got a few people who want questions, a bunch of people who've typed them in, and people who are on the line waiting. Were you going to be able to make it for the other side of our break?
Sure, no problem.
All right, if you'd like to, go ahead and finish. We got about 5 minutes till the break comes, but I'd really love for you to tell the rest of the people exactly what this turn on the corner is.
Well, the turn on the corner is once I saw that the number for Kithara, which became Sitara, which became guitar, is 5-1, and it's the same number in the Great Pyramid. And then I found that Stonehenge was sitting at 51 degrees north latitude, and then I remeasured the Ark of the Covenant in the Bible, because there are so many different Egyptian cubits, and I used Peter Lemazure's book, The Great Pyramid Decoded, and found that the most common measurement in the pyramid was 41.21 Egyptian inches equals 2 royal cubits. And that just blew my mind, because if you take 41.21 Egyptian inches is 2 royal cubits, you divide that by 2, you get a true cubit, which is 20.605 inches. God said, make the Ark of the Covenant 2.5 cubits long. It's 5151. The same number. The Ark of the Covenant that Moses used is the same number as the slope angle of the pyramid, is the same number as the frequency of the capstone, and the same number for Kithara, which became guitar and sitar and the harp. So that's the number of the harmonic scale. So then I literally built all of my tones, 10 tones, around that number, because I started doing math on the pyramid and I found the rest of the numbers fall in incredible pattern. So I have 10 tones, and I've rediscovered the scale that Orpheus used to tame this out. You got to read about Orpheus, the god, Orpheus. And then Pythagoras, this is probably the number he had, because the Greeks encoded it with the instrument, the oldest instrument in Greece, the Kithara. And then the Ark of the Covenant has the same number on it. Stonehenge is sitting with the same number. And then clearly, Jesus, when he teaches the 7 sacred tones in the Gospel of the Egyptians, was using this 5151 music scale. When you hear the 10-5-1 tones at the end of the video, they're so perfect they do not distort in the distortion test. And those are the tones that people in my course are meditating to, and many of them are already getting visited by light beings and experiencing elevated states of consciousness, and we've only been doing this. I mean, you can start any time you want, but people have started about 4 weeks ago, and so they're already having some. Yeah, and
I've seen testimonials come from people from your site, and I also want to let the listeners know, if you're interested in seeing the video that David's talking about this lost scale, I have posted it on Facebook under the Enlightenment Evolution Hour like page. You can go there. The video's there, and it's also on my Facebook page, Rob Gauthier, Kalamazoo. You go there, and both pages have that video post. I also posted it in the chat room, so if you're on the link, look at the bottom of the chat, and I will repost it one more time, just so that you guys will have that link again. We're going to get ready to roll to the break. I have a couple announcements I have to do, and then I've got to play the network announcements. So if you'd like, we could meet back here in about 10 minutes, and we'll start talking about the experiences that have personally changed your experiences with the tones, and anything more behind it, kind of explaining quantumly maybe how the sound vibration, love vibration, all of those things interact with our DNA that help us grow in our own spiritual path.
Okay, we'll see you in 10 minutes.
All right, we'll see you in 10, and thanks again, David. For all of you who are just tuning in, this is the Enlightenment Evolution Hour with your host, Rob Gauthier, and this is a very, very wonderful day. We got a wonderful guest, David Sereda. He's just been talking about meditation in 35 years, a new lost scale that he uses to go into deep meditative states and help yourself ascend to that level of consciousness that he's been explaining. A lot of the ancient cultures have different names for it, but this is a really wonderful show, wonderful guest. Now we're going to get to a few announcements. TrebChanneling.com, very first announcement. Next week on this show, for the Enlightenment Evolution Hour, we will have special guest Lee Harris. He will be talking with me for an hour, and after that, I'm going to open up the phone line so that myself and the listeners can have a conversation about what Lee shared with us. He will be doing a special channeling from the Z's. If you don't know who Lee Harris is, go to LeeHarrisEnergy.com or go to YouTube and check out Lee Harris Energy Forecast. Second announcement that we have for TrebChanneling.com is April 3rd, 4th, and 5th in Asheville, North Carolina, we will be doing the 3-day Treb Channeling Workshop. This is going to be a channeling workshop where you come not just to learn how to channel, not just to listen to channel, but we're also going to be doing CE5, where we're going out, meditating, deep meditative states, calling on crafts to come down and check us out. And we will also be watching the entire lunar eclipse. That lunar eclipse on April 4th has some very, very strong, potent energy, and we can all be a part of that. Kalina will be presenting. We're going to also have a special guest pop in and see what he wants to talk about. It will be amazing. If you'd like to go to TrebChanneling.com, you can go to the workshop tab under upcoming events or under the event tab, and it will be workshops, and you can check it out, all the information. You can go to any tab under events, and it will lead you back to the workshop tab with the poster. You just click on the poster, it'll take you right there. What we're going to do now is play the announcements, which will be here in a couple minutes. So this announcements talks about all of the Enlightenment Evolution Network shows. Also, one thing about the network that is not on the recordings is what I told you guys at the very, very opening of the show. The YouTube page for the Enlightenment Evolution Network is being updated every couple days. So you will be able to hear this show either tomorrow or the day after on YouTube. A lot of people have been saying sometimes Blog Talk with the links are having difficulties, but everyone loves YouTube. So go there, subscribe to us there. Go to the Enlightenment Evolution Network fan page on Facebook, like that, and you will get all the links for all the shows through Blog Talk and on YouTube. And go to the Enlightenment Evolution Hour page. If you guys like what you hear on the show today, we do accept donations, as we do this for everyone can listen for free, and we don't get paid anything. We pay a small fee to stay on the air as a network. So if you'd wish to donate to either the network or to this show directly, go to TrebChanneling.com to the donate button, or the Enlightenment Evolution Hour or the Enlightenment Evolution Network tab, and you can donate there. Enjoy the announcements that are talking about every single show that we have here on the Enlightenment Evolution Network.
Views and topics discussed are not necessarily the opinions of Enlightenment Evolution Network.
Hi, this is Karen Newman from the show About Oneness, and here's what's coming up on the Enlightenment Evolution Network 1 and 2, starting on Monday, November the 3rd, until Sunday, November the 9th. Simply put, Rob Gauthier, founder of the EEN and the host of the show that started it all, the Enlightenment Evolution Hour, has put together the greatest metaphysical radio network ever. 7 days a week, we have shows that will aid you on your path to enlightenment, evolution, and ascension. On EEN1, Mondays, it's 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, is Heart to Heart Talk Radio with your host, Daniel Scranton. Join Daniel and his featured guests discussing a wide variety of metaphysical topics. Daniel channels the Creators, the Hathors, Ophelia the Fairy, and Archangel Michael, and the latest, the Unicorn Collective. Daniel and his guests will take phone calls and questions, and it's sure to generate high-frequency discussions. You can find more about Daniel at his website, danielscranton.com, and also on Facebook. Go to the Events tab on Daniel's website to learn more about Daniel's upcoming events. Daniel's guest this Tuesday is Doug Baseball Guy White, and on the 10th of November, his guest is Terry Piowa. Terry is an intuitive, psychic, and astrologer. On Tuesday at noon, also 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, please join hosts Megan Crandallmeyer and Rachel Archelaus for Radio Inspiration, Expression, and Abundance for their show Soulfulpreneur. Spiritual business specialists Rachel and Megan will bring you inspiring conversations with people who are living their soul purpose. Frequent guests include psychic mediums, channelers, coaches, artists, and authors. They end every show with psychic readings and business coaching. Your questions about your spiritual business or life purpose journey are welcome. Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific, is the show that started it all, the Enlightenment Evolution Hour with host Rob Gauthier. Rob channels Treb on the first Wednesday of each month and will take callers' questions. On the third Wednesday, we'll have special guests such as guest channelers and other metaphysical teachers. The other 2 Wednesdays are freestyle call-in shows to discuss whatever callers have on their minds. Tune in to Rob on Wednesday nights, and you can also find him at trebchanneling.com and on Facebook at the Enlightenment Evolution Network group page. Rob has 2 special announcements. Starting on Sundays from September 14th, trebchanneling.com offers hour-long meditation classes. Please go to trebchanneling.com to register. Another project near and dear to Rob's heart is the much-anticipated sequel to the groundbreaking film Tuning In, called Tuning In Now. The movie will feature channelers such as Daryl Anka and Bashar, Lee Carroll and Cryon, and our very own Rob Gauthier and Treb. Tuning In Now will explore the amazing work of today's top channels and how they are helping to awaken the consciousness of the planet. The film is in fundraising stages at the moment, and with a contribution for as little as $15 all the way up to $50, you can help make sure that this film is made. Please go to Indiegogo.com, that's Indie, I-N-D-I-E, Gogo, G-O-G-O.com, and type in the search Tuning In Now 2. That's the number 2. Tuning In Now with the number 2. On Thursday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific, join host Philip Malika with the Consciousness Evolution Hour. Join Philip and his special guests and co-hosts as they discuss the shift, ascension, timelines, metaphysical concepts, and the 5th dimension. Find Philip at the Consciousness Evolution 2.0 group page on Facebook and on YouTube. On Friday, The Earth Experience with your host, Kalina Angel, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific. The Earth Experience explores our soul's expansion through our human experience on Earth. Kalina will help you to navigate and expand through the exciting confusions that we are manifesting as new 5D beings. On Sundays, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 11 a.m. Pacific, is my show, About Oneness. About Oneness is a weekly radio program focused on celebrating the ongoing conscious awakening of our planet and our realization of oneness. I'm an American originally from Charleston, South Carolina, now living in Europe, The Hague, the Netherlands. I'm an integrated channel, medium, Reiki master, and metaphysical teacher. I have a varied and diverse background, including that of being a singer, dancer, writer, as well as working in the sport, nutrition, and fitness world. As a channel, I bring forward the information of my non-physical guides called Theos, whose message is always that of oneness and unconditional love. This show for me is about integrating all of my experiences and following my highest excitement, which is tapping into the truth of the universe. If you would like to find more about me and my show and my upcoming guests, as well as see many videos and channelings and teachings, you can go to aboutoneness.com. My guest on Sunday, November the 9th, is medium Annika Clausens from the Netherlands. Annika attended the world-renowned Arthur Findlay College in the UK, and as a mentor, she has Mavis Patilla. If you have questions about mediumship and tuning in to those that have passed on, have your questions ready because Annika will be live and taking callers' questions. On the Enlightenment Evolution Network 2, on Tuesdays, join host Victoria Vives at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific, hosting Earth Sky People Radio, your bridge between heaven and earth. Subjects will include planet Earth becoming part of an intergalactic society, star seeds and extraterrestrial life, living in oneness with one another, with Mother Earth and with life beyond Earth, the Interstellar Alliance, also known as the Galactic Federation of Light, music, frequency and sound healing, question and answer interviews, shamanism, ancestral wisdom, and the star nations, self-sustainative and regenerative living, and much, much more. Go to victoriavives.com/radio where people can start submitting questions for upcoming shows. Victoria's show on Tuesday the 4th is Victoria's Secret to Fall in Love with Life on Earth, special training for both star seeds and earthlings. On Tuesday the 11th, her guests are New Earth Music and New Earth Theater, bringing a new dimension of consciousness to music and entertainment. On Saturday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 6 p.m. Pacific, the Pied Piper and Texas Rebel hosting the show Disclosure Now. Disclosure Now is the On the Edge of Our Seats show. It covers all topics of disclosure, from the world's most famous and obscure UFO cases to cryptozoology, conspiracies, and all things that go bump in the night. Pied Piper started his journey in Michigan in 1993 as a preteen seeing Bigfoot and never could get enough of investigating all things paranormal. Texas Rebel is a wild Texas man who loves the same journey and has studied these same things for years. Join them as they cover all things in the human experience that just cannot be answered by anyone. Listen here and call in on the number 347-215-8586. Coming soon on Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1 p.m. Pacific, The Resonance and Tension, hosted by Soul and Neil Gar. The Resonance and Tension show is dedicated to all things frequency and vibration. They will showcase conscious musicians who infuse frequencies into their music and have set out to uplift and raise the vibration of humanity through their music. They will have in-depth discussions with various artists about their passion, purpose, and personal journey that led them to where they are now. Additionally, they will routinely have guests on the topics of free energy, technology, and other quantum modalities and technologies that are coming into existence now. The Resonance Intention is a platform for artists, musicians, and inventors to increase awareness of their personal approach in order to contribute to the paradigm shift we are currently within. And remember, you never have to miss any show on the Enlightenment Evolution Network 1 or 2. All shows are available to listen to again immediately after they air on playback. All right, back to the show.
Views and topics discussed are not necessarily the opinions of Enlightenment Evolution Network.
All right, everybody, we are back from the break. Wonderful announcements. We have David Sereda with us. He was just talking about the law scale, which is a harmonic or a sound vibration on a perfect notated scale that helps allow a kundalini rising or an energy to go up through the chakra systems to help activate your chakras to a full degree so that you can achieve a more enlightened and blissful state. We're going to have him come right on. Before we get started, if you guys are just tuning in, this is the Enlightenment Evolution Hour with your host, Rob Gauthier. There are many callers on the line, and if you have a question for David, then what I would like to ask you to do is go ahead and hit 1 on your telephone. This shows me that you would like to ask a question instead of just being someone who's listening via phone. This is a very important distinguishment. There you go, 641. I just seen you come on and off a couple times. All right, so basically, if you guys want to ask David a question, please hit not 641, just hit the button number 1, and your question will be right in the queue. We're going to take some questions after David finishes up telling us about the new course that he's doing with this law scale. Are you here with us, David?
Yes, I am, Rob.
All right. Beautiful. Can you please, before we start taking callers, can you finish what we were talking about earlier? Kind of tell people what this course entails and where they go if they're interested in getting into this course.
Well, firstly, I wanted to say that, the methods in the Far East for attaining enlightenment have traditionally revolved around breath, sound, and light. And sound and light activation, and in that order. And if your cells are well oxygenated with breath work or pranayama, and then you do the toning, it's far more powerful than if you were just sitting back listening to them. And then we use our own voices to match the tones, and you start hearing this 3D spinning holographic wave inside of you when you do that, and that's where people really start having experiences. You see, the Lord's Prayer in the the Christian tradition, in Jesus' own language of Aramaic, addresses the sound and the light as God, not some old man in the sky who's, supposedly his father. He says, "O thou from whom the breath of life comes, who fills all realms with sound, light, and vibration, may you touch me in my utmost holiest. Your heavenly domain approaches. Let your will come true in all that is material and dense." So he's talking about bringing the high vibrations down into what is material and dense. But he starts with breath and then sound and light. And what's amazing about that is that's the way the Tibetan system works today. I mean, most of their work is through harmonics and sound and mantras, and years of practicing mantras that cause you to resonate. And prayers, very, very long Tibetan intonements and prayers and activations. And on what harmonics do is the way a radio works is you have in your cell phone and your computer, you have quartz crystal oscillators that are a combination of quartz crystal and layers of metallic conductive material. So you have conductive and semiconductive layers that generate frequencies. Whenever any 2 points in space-time are at the same frequency, by any means actually, you set up communication, and that's why your cell phone rings, and that's why, when you're searching the internet, there's frequencies governing communication everywhere with technology. But your body has the same materials in it. You have semiconductive silica in your body. It's in all your organs. It's in your hair, your bones, and you have calcium, which is also a semiconductive electrolyte, and you have phosphorus in your bones. So your bones are like solid-state crystals, which is surrounded by mostly salt mineralized water, about 60 to 80% water, depending on how hydrated you are. So you're surrounded with a liquid crystal. So we're basically living crystal oscillators, solid state and liquid state crystal oscillators. And in fact, in the early days when these three guys were developing the first transistors, which is another component running your computer, your Intel computer chip has over 3 billion transistors, and they're made the same way almost as a crystal oscillator. It's just layers of gold or conductive material in crystal to amplify signals for color, signals for everything that you do in your computer and your cell phone is being governed by crystal oscillators, frequency generators, and transistor amplifiers. Your body has all that same stuff in it. And there's part of my course is teaching people the three bodies, the physical body and then the electric physical body, which flows into the astral body. And then the astral body, eventually you get the light body, the causal body activated. And that is what Jesus refers to as the chrisms, or the light body being activated. And one of the reasons we know the scale I discovered is activating the light body is we did aura camera photography, and we transmitted the tones with my frequency generators, which are at davidsereda.net. You can see those there too. And we looked at the auras before and after, and it was astounding how much more light was coming out of our subjects after a 1-hour session, toning them with the pyramid frequency scale, but they didn't hear anything because we did it magnetically, which is deeper than a sound wave. So we know it works. And we know it works because the people who are just doing the meditations, which is a combination of breath work, and the first week they listen to the first 10 tones. See, there's 10 central tones in the scale. Just like on your piano, you can go from the left, A, B, C, D, F, G, A, B, C, D, F, G, A, B, C, D, F, G, all the way to the right. And those are octave increases. And octave increases are your tones times 2 times 2 times 2. So RA is at 440 hertz, which is not very harmonic. It's pretty far off, actually. And so what I've done is I've taken the base 10 tones, but I'm using nature's octave. I don't use times 2. And I've got a total of 120 tones and 3 different scales of 120 tones. So I have 360 tones that fit inside of the bandwidth that the human ear can perceive, and that's miraculous, because our current music scale of 12 tones, the chromatic scale, which we all use in electronic keyboards and computer-generated music and pianos, and it's everywhere. Chromatic is everywhere. It pretty much rules music. That scale is a corrupted scale, and it's only slightly off. So music does sound good. It does get you a little bit high, but you're not, believe me, when you shift, if all the pianos in the world were shifted to the law scale, we'd all be getting a lot higher just from listening to the music, let alone doing the meditation techniques. So when Jesus addresses God as the sound and the light, O thou from whom the breath of life comes, who fills all realms with sound, light, and vibration, oh my God, that's a whole different picture of God than we're told in the modern sense of what modern Christianity believes. And it's very consistent with the ancient Vedas, which are probably the oldest manuscripts in the Middle East. The earliest copies date back 10,000 years or more, according to B.G. Siddharth, a very, very great Indian scholar in astronomy. And they were found in Turkey, not India, and they eventually migrated into, the Indian civilization. And then you have the pyramid texts, which are probably older than those. So those are probably the 2 oldest. And the Old Testament, see, the beginning of Rig Veda is almost identical to Genesis. In Genesis, the world starts, there's darkness in space, there's a void, and then God breathes upon the waters and agitates the waters, and then you get light, and then there's light. Well, that's exactly how nature works. If you take the void of space, dark matter, and then you create vibrations give birth to heat. That's called the cosmic microwave background radiation, and that heat eventually, coalesces and forms stars and planets. And the stars are very, very dense vortices and standing waves where you build up enough resonance to fuse elements together and give birth to heat, which eventually becomes light. And so Rig Veda is almost the same as Genesis, and it's because Rig Veda is much older, it's most likely that Genesis borrowed ideas from Rig Veda. I mean, they're not identical, but they're almost the same. In the first verse of Rig Veda, it talks about the void and breathing upon the waters and causing and animating the stars and the planets into existence. So we work the same way. It's basically where Pythagoras believed our body was a musical instrument called the musica humana, and if it was tuned properly with harmonic sound, you could attain enlightenment just through sound. And Orpheus, the great ancient Greek master who comes before Pythagoras, who is beheaded because he discovered this very, very great scale in ancient Egypt, believed the same, that we reincarnated, but while we were alive, we could learn harmonics and attain enlightenment through harmonics. Now, what's missing in this huge yoga craze in the Western world is we're taught some very simple mantras, and mantra is just a word that resonates with something in nature. And believe it or not, in Rig Veda, the mantra Om is the sound of the sun. That's what it is. And that's where it comes from. And if we took the actual recording of the sound of the sun and we tested the human aura with that, and because NASA actually recorded it, and I purified the file because it had a lot of clicks in it, and we have all these things on my website at davidsereda.net for people who wanted to actually just play around with some of these simple harmonics. But
Sure.
Basically, when we chant Om, we're just chanting one tone. But we have 10 chakras in our system, 7 at least, and some of us have the upper 3 activated, which gives us 10. But instead of chanting Om, we should be doing an entire scale. But you don't just guess how you chant Om. You have to match it to perfect master tones, which we're normally taught by an oral master teacher. But because of the math I've done on the pyramid, we know these tones are perfect because when we distortion test them, there's no distortion. So we start using our voice in the course after we do some light breath work to intone the tones with our voice, and that's when you start hearing the 3D spinning wave, which is spinning your kundalini upwards, and everything starts happening. But every 2 weeks we shift octaves because there's a total of 10 tones times 12 octaves, and then there's 3 scales. So this course is going to be going on for years.
That would be my question then. If someone wanted to take your course and join that and try that out for themselves, how long could they expect to be in? And I know you probably can set it where they don't have to be in for any specific amount of time or however you do it, I'm not sure. But what would be the average person to work through all 10 of those tones and learn these keys for themselves so that they can not just listen to it or even magnetically receive it, but to use their own voice to achieve that? How long of a time period would you say that would take?
Well, the course is 6 months, and then you get 6 months to practice on your own. You can start any time. Every week you get a series of downloads. You get a lecture, MP3 file lecture, and then you get high quality .aif or MP3 downloads of the tones. So there's 10 tones, but every week we shift octaves. So remember, it's like A, B, C, D, F, G on the piano on the low end, so you start really low and you're using vowels, which is what Jesus taught in the Gospel of the Egyptian, these 7 vowels, to make the tones with your voice. And when you hit it, it's pretty easy to hit it. You start hearing the shimmering wave inside of you. If you're off key, you won't hear the shimmering wave. That's how you know you're pretty much in the range of that tone. So once the wave starts shimmering inside of you, then you now have changed to a 2-dimensional wave, because most sound is only in 2 dimensions, into a 3-dimensional wave, and that's what you want to do. And so you're going to shift octaves every 2 weeks, and that takes 6 months to do one scale. And the next year we do another scale, and the next year we do another scale, and then we start moving into, in year 4, the scale. There's a music scale I've decoded in all 9 planets based on the circumference of all the 9 planets. They're all producing music, which Pythagoras also taught. He called it the music of the spheres, the music of the 9 planets, and then we start moving into the musical scales of different star systems and toning to those. So by the time people have mastered the main scale, they'll be so perfectly tuned as a human instrument. And not only that, your voice gets better if you're a singer. I mean, I'm a terrible singer, and my wife was trained in opera and jazz, and I sound so much better just from 1 month of toning. I thought I didn't even think it was possible at my age of 53 to get a better voice. It's kind of fun to sing around
great.
the house.
And we've got a few callers that are pretty anxious to get some questions in.
Sure.
So before we get to that, it would be davidsereda.net where they would go if they were interested in looking through the course curriculum, correct?
Yeah, David Sereda is SEREDA.net, and there's no period in there. So, yeah, that's where they go.
Okay. All right. We're going to take our first caller who's been waiting for the entirety of the show, area code 641. Who do we have with us this evening?
Hi, this is Russell in Fairfield, Iowa.
Hey, Russell, how are we doing tonight?
I am totally psyched to be on the phone with you.
All right. Well, that's great.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, what do you have for David?
Well, my question is, in most of the, I'm not really that studied in religions, but I know that you have a basic understanding of the fall from grace, where there's this, concept of the myth of falling from grace. And, we have like a Riddif's version of, how the dimensions work, and then coming down into the base dimensions so that we can have this physical experience of the full octave of our, or resonance of our DNA, to experience all the way down to the bottom, and then kind of wake up again to be able to experience both the high and the low vibrations of our full physical embodiment. And so in that fall, it's been my perception and work that I've been doing that there was specific stuff that was put in both through the angelic realm or creators or whoever you want to call that to actually lower our vibration physically so that we would be able to have that lower experience vibrationally, not in terms of as a detriment, but to have that oneness with that lower vibration, not as, in hierarchy where higher is better and blah, 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 lower is better, lower's worse, but to have that resonance all the way through. And it feels to me as if that we are releasing that actual mechanics of that which lowers us down into being focused in that, first, second, third density experience. And I was just wondering if you, my interest is in the method of dissolving those by like naming it specifically in some fashion to be able to tune into it and dissolve those keys or seals or whatever it is that are being released as we raise up. And I was just wondering if you have anything like through your experiences through all these religions that kind of ties that together in such a way that we might be able to, give me your understanding of that and a way of actually addressing it so that we can release that and raise up physically and have the more broader spectrum of who we really are. I know it's not a small question, but that's my thing.
It's a really good question. It's why did we fall, and why didn't we just stay in the light? And in the long run, you learn that the fall eventually leaves some of us to ascend even higher than our original creation, and that's how God evolves when we finally come back up. When I met Christ in person, he showed me the true meaning of the fall. And the partaking of the knowledge of good and evil, we went from singularity. See, Jesus says in the Gospel of Thomas, when you were in the light, you were one, but when you become two, what will you do? So you were in a non-dual state of oneness in the light. And we were all born, Jesus told me, at the first heaven of creation. So we were all born equal in the first light. But there's all these other potential illuminated states above us. And when you take in the knowledge of good and evil, what you do is you polarize light into positive and negative. And you egoify your position on what you think is good and what is evil. And that's the illusion, because your neighbor always does it different. So the same religion gets polarized and polarized and polarized, and nobody can agree on anything, even inside of the religion. And they get very angry in their conversations because they think, no, it's this way. And the other guy goes, no, it's this way. And the other woman goes, no, it's this way. This is what Jesus really meant. And then everybody ends up, they go to holy war status because you just don't get along. And that is the poison. The poison is the polarity matrix, forms inside of you. And light is an open, expanded consciousness. And duality forms a force field, Jesus showed me, which is what's holding the ego together. The egg is being held together like a magnet has a positive and negative pole. A sphere, a planet, has a positive and negative pole. Now, had it become, in quantum physics, if you create a monopole magnetic field, matter will come apart. The physical boundary of the cell dissolves, which is what's holding the ego and the consciousness in this tiny little egg, this tiny little limited egotistical perspective that says, I got it right and you got it wrong. When the other guy goes, no, God meant it this way. So there's a million ways to polarize a field, so nobody can agree on anything. Everybody's arguing about God and about everything. And then the religion gets sliced into, 10 pieces and then 200 pieces. And then pretty soon there's so many different forms of Christianity, there's so many different forms of Buddhism, which there are, because everybody thinks they got it right and the other guy's got it wrong. When the ego gets really intense, it pulls out weapons and says, the other forms of this religion can no longer exist, and I'm going to exterminate you because I'm God's representative. And God said it goes this way, not that way. And so Jesus said that's the poison. You see, evil is live spelled backwards. So when you get to the point that you're harming life and you're oppressing life and then taking life, that's when you're so angry at the other guy or the other woman that you believe you're so right and they're so wrong that you're going to take them down. But the worst thing we do in the polarized field is we no longer love the other. Jesus said, love your neighbor, do good to those that persecute you, because he's trying to dissolve the duality. So he told me that the interpretation of the fall is totally incorrect, in that we didn't really understand what was happening because we're sitting inside of it. We're in duality. We think the evil guy is the bad guy, but the bad guy is always the other guy. And if you read Elaine Pagel's professor of religion at Princeton's book, The Origin of Satan, when you get to the end, you'll find out that Satan is always the other guy. It's always the other guy because you got it right and the other guy got it wrong. And that's the poison. It kills us from loving each other. Children don't do this to each other. They all love each other. They'll all play with each other. They'll all learn how to get along. But we say no to your daughter. You can't marry someone of another religion or somebody who's a different faith of Christianity because they got it wrong and we got it right. And everyone's guilty of this. I've seen it a million times. That's the poison. So Jesus said in Matthew, I think it's 16:22, I forget, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be filled with light. And single means no longer in duality. But later, the next verse in the Gospel says, if thine eye be evil, you'll be filled with darkness. But in the Gospel of Thomas, it says, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be filled with light. But if thine eye be divided, you'll be filled with darkness. Because divided means duality. So why did we go from light into duality and then into ego consciousness that's so small? And because the more intense you believe your version is right and the other guy's wrong, the more you're going to suffer, because you're going to isolate yourself. And you're going to get into arguments where you swear you're right and your friends aren't going to get along with you anymore because, you just think you got it all figured out and nobody else has got it figured out. And so what ends up happening is you get more and more isolated, you get more and more depressed, and somehow you think in the end, God's going to come along and say, you got it right. And all your friends got it wrong. And that's the joke. It's a joke. See, when Adam and Eve took in the knowledge of good and evil, they suddenly realized, oh my God, I'm naked. They started judging themselves. God never judged them for enjoying paradise in their deerskin suits. They judged themselves when they took in the knowledge of good and evil. It made them neurotic. So Jesus is trying to get you to come back to singularity, non-dualism. And this is a huge part of my course on singularity. Why did we fall? This is the greatest question the caller has asked, and that is because once you suffer, this is really amazing in physics. Light travels, we understand it, at 186,282 miles per second, or just under 300,000 kilometers a second. But as soon as you trap light with a material like steel in a little tube, it will quantum tunnel through the barrier faster than the speed of light. It's known as quantum tunneling. And in fact, they've noticed this with putting Raymond Chow at UC Berkeley ran wavelengths of light through ordinary glass sheets, and it would go through the glass at many multiples of the speed of light because it quantum tunneled. So it's kind of like that. You were born at a certain level of light consciousness, all of us, the first heaven, but because we went into duality, we're eventually going to go into a super light state that's faster and higher in frequency than the original light we were created in because we got trapped. But it doesn't happen to everybody. Some souls get really stuck in the ego and they just can't figure out how you get out of this thing. And they pretty much eventually get very angry at the idea of God, and they become their own demigods in their own way, and they become very oppressive, very financially powerful, some of them not, And they use their power symbols to manipulate and oppress other people, to forcibly eventually give them the kind of gratifications that they want to fulfill their very tiny little, ego states of consciousness. And these become demonic or dark force type beings. And they really are evil in the sense that they will take your life. And they, on the other side, get the ego, the skin on the ego when the polarity matrix is so heavy duty that they basically don't let any light in, and they suffer so much, and they just want everyone else around them to suffer. So that explains, in part, how you get dark force beings like a Satan, a fallen one, and so forth. Because those beings don't have any ability to touch your light body once you've attained it. But they eventually get powerful enough that if you have not attained the light body, they can really mess with you. And that's why you want to do the work on yourself and attain what Jesus called the chrisms, and before you die. You want to start doing this work now. Don't rely on a promise that actually makes no sense at all scientifically. Imagine, this is what Jesus told me happens when you die. When you die, it doesn't matter what you did in your life. The question is, what is your vibrational state? The universe and heaven only notice your vibrational state. Jesus said the light wants to save everybody. It wants everybody to come to heaven. But if they're hanging on to too much stuff and too much weight and too much resentment, and they don't forgive themselves for carrying all this resentment and anger, they're too heavy to get into the light. They're not light enough to get into the light. They're heavy, dense. And it doesn't matter what they believe and what they say, and they can shout Jesus' name. It doesn't matter. They're still too heavy. And if they go into heaven, which he said some of them do for a short time, they're so unfamiliar with that much love and openness and beautiful energy, it scares them. And they judge themselves out of heaven. God doesn't judge anybody. They judge themselves out because they go, whoa, I can't handle being that open and loving. That's too freaky for me, and they leave. And he said most people from this planet, when they die, they don't last very long in heaven because it's too scary to have their heart that open.
Well, thank you, David. I appreciate that. It's a beautiful answer and very, very wonderful question, caller. We thank you guys for bringing in the call. And we're only going to have enough time for a couple more calls. We've got callers with their hands up, but there's some that drop on and off. So if you got a question, please hit 1 on your phone. This will bring you up to the front of the queue, which shows us that you have a question for David. We're going to go to our next question from a caller. This would be our dear friend from Germany. Are you with us? Hello?
Hello?
Hey, how we doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
I'm doing great. Do you have a question for David tonight?
Just in general, where he sees a connection between those religious forces and the current political agenda of the Vatican.
Well, that's the question. The political agenda of the Vatican is to keep you codependent on them, to make you believe that they are your binding force to being saved. And in reality, what I just told you is if you can't handle that, see, heaven is a higher state of energy. It's a higher vibrational state. And if you're still in a low frequency state when you die, it doesn't matter what you believe. You will be afraid of that much high vibrational love. So the point in the Gospel of Philip, read the Gospel of Philip. If you don't attain the resurrection when you live, when you die, you'll receive nothing. Those Gospels were outlawed because they wanted the church, they wanted to make you codependent on the church so they could have all your money and your power. Who has all your money and your power is the Vatican Bank. So that slavery and relationship does not free you at all. So the agenda of the Catholic Church is to make you believe that they have power over your soul. When the choices you make to choose love in your life or not choose love in your life, and not choose integrity in your life or choose integrity of life, and are going to affect your vibrational state so that when you die, you won't be afraid of the high vibration of heaven. You'll open your arms to it and receive it. And every one of us deserves it because it's our birthright.
Well, thank you, David, for that, too. And thank you, too, for the wonderful question. We've got another question from the 443 area code. Who do we have with us this evening?
Rob, this is Vital. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, Rivital. How are you?
I'm doing awesome, believe it or not, but I decided to jump on, and here you have this fabulous call, conversation, and I'm so grateful for everything, including myself, for being here.
Oh, well, I'm glad to have you on tonight. And Kalina wanted me to pass the hello to you. What question do you have for David tonight?
Believe it or not, I'm so overwhelmed by his information that I don't have any sophisticated question for him because I'm still digesting everything that he said. Because David, it's my father's name. I'm so into the layers of all the information you were just pouring over there, and I was looking at your website, and I was starting to, very overwhelming, kind of enlightening, so to say, and like bringing it from someone who can actually talk about it. That's more than amazing, and it's ineffable. Okay, but my question is really small and technical and really, really simple. I started listening to you about 9 and 5 minutes, okay, and you were just flowing with your description of your meditation and the realms of high frequencies that you have reached. And I really wanted to ask you, how did it all started? How did you all started? I understand that you do the overtones and the music, and this is how you are able to bring yourself into those realms of light. But how did it all started for you? Because once I was listening to you, I said to myself, did he was going through postmortem or some kind of near-death experience or some kind of I'm sorry, I just missed it. So if you can just repeat it for me.
Well, what had happened is my father got me into meditating and introduced me to a lot of gurus from India, and I started meditating, and by the time I was 18, I was meditating every single day in long hours, and I took up tree planting. I wanted to plant trees and do things for the ecology. But I started meditating an awful lot, like 4 6-hour days, 3-hour days, 2-hour days, in the sitting posture, not in a row, but I would take breaks. But and that's how it started. And then about 1986, the end of 86, going into 87 is when I had the it's like a near-death experience, but there was nothing physically wrong with me when I went through the 7 levels of heaven. And so that's how that started. So it's years and years of practicing yoga and practicing the meditations that really started it.
All right. Well, thank you, David, for that, and thank you, Rivital, for your call. This will probably be the last question we could get to. We've got about 7 minutes before I'll have to wrap it up with you and make our final goodbyes to the listeners this evening. But my one question, it's actually a 2-part question for you. You had talked about love being essential, love being the biggest part of any expansion that each one of us have within our own consciousness. So, A, what is love? What is it made of? How does it affect our DNA? And B, what you said that there was one thing that made love look inferior, and that was the graces. And can you define graces for us?
Well, firstly, love is, it's so magical that it's even there. Like when I look at my little daughter, who's 4, Lyra, and we named her after the lyre, the harp, the early harp. it's just, you don't know why, but when you look at your own child, there's just unimaginable depths of harmonic feelings that radiate out of your heart center. And I would cry just holding my daughter as she falls asleep in my arms when she was little. And she's 4 now, and I still cry when she falls asleep on my chest. Love it's magical that it's even there. Nobody knows where it comes from, but it seems to well up within the chest, because sometimes when we feel too much of it, we feel this great pressure in our chest, and as we breathe, more and more tears come, tears of joy, tears of love. And love can also just be tremendous, high, blissful feelings, looking into the eyes and the embodiment of a person that we're feeling attracted to. And it can start out with very simple physical attraction and then eventually merge into higher feelings for that person. And it's just fantastic that it's there. It's a mystery. There's no way to define where it comes from, but we know it's a universal feeling because anybody who comes into any truth in themselves feels it. And so there it is. It's magic. It comes from the universe. But when you go into the light, when I went into the light, actually it's probably better to describe this from Christ. When I looked upon the face of Christ, the first time I saw him in mid-October of 1994, his face was truly brighter than 1,000 of our suns. I could not stand up in his presence. I was fallen in the spirit on my face, and every time I looked at him, it's too powerful. I saw the entire creation coming from Christ and the light of Christ. There's no sensation that you're in the presence of a man or a woman at all in the presence of Christ. And it's not feminine or masculine. It's so far beyond that. And the first ring of the light that comes from the halo of Christ is pure, utter holiness and silence. And the next ring is pure innocence and openness. Like a child's innocence is so open. When you look at a child's eyes, they're so open. And when Jesus was asked, who is the greatest of in the kingdom of heaven, he answered, unless like a small child shall you enter the kingdom of heaven. Because the children are open and innocent. And Christ is the most innocent and the most open, so he radiates this supreme, supreme light because of that openness. And the next band that comes off of him is such high grace. The graces they are truly feminine in nature, in that they are so still and so omnipresent and so full of absolute perfection and caringness. And I could go on and on about the graces. What you perceive in the presence of the grace is the Divine Mother, but it's not like a human mother. It's like the mother of the whole universe, like the birther of all the qualities of God. And out of the graces come all the other qualities of supreme wisdom, sacred geometries, mathematical formulas that are creating and maintaining everything, the music of the spheres, the music of the angels, and eventually you come down to love. And love is the closest ray to humans that bonds us to the light. So the human love, even though it's imperfect, sometimes we feel so perfect with somebody, and the next thing you know, we're not getting along. But human love is good because it's awakening the heart. It's awakening all of the chakras, actually, and it's eventually giving us glimpses of something higher than just feeling the body. When you feel tremendous love, it's like you're bursting at the seams. Your energy wants to burst past your heart, past your crown chakra, into this other person, and then into the beyond. But when you don't feel love, you feel stuck in this physical body, and you feel the pleasures and the pains of the body and the sensation. So the love is really it's like the binding agent that can pull us into the light. Without it, you just can't get in. there's no way to get into the light. So heaven, when we die, if we're afraid of the love, if we're uncomfortable with the feeling of love, we naturally are afraid of it and reject it. God doesn't judge us out of heaven, but we judge ourselves out because we have no experience with this love thing. We didn't put it as a priority in our life. We put other things as a priority.
Absolutely, and I want to tell you, it's at that time, David, where the show is just about to wrap up. I want to, before you hang up and before you disconnect with us tonight, I want to give you a very, very special thanks for coming on the show, taking questions from callers, taking your time and energy to speak with us and to talk to us. And for all of you who are listening, if you're interested in finding out more about David and his work, especially with his new lost scale that he has not just found and done all the work to achieve, but also that he's sharing with the world right now, go to davidsereda.net. That's SEREDA. I just want to say thank you again, David, and we appreciate, and hopefully if you'd like to come back later on after you get some more time in between now and then, I'd really love to hear the long-lasting effects of this new lost scale on people.
Sure, I'd love to come back, Rob, and I love the callers. I love every one of them. They're so wonderful. Their questions were great. Their energy was so wonderful, and you were very great. I love this forum. Thank you for creating this space to share this energy.
Oh, well, thank you for being a part of it, and that's what this network's about, is sharing from our hearts and letting all people have. And we do. We have some of the best callers ever, very well-informed, very large heart centers. And thank you again, David, very much. I'll be in touch with you soon. And thanks again for joining the Enlightenment Evolution Hour tonight. It's been a great pleasure.
Okay, good night, everybody.
All right, thanks, David. All right, everybody, that was David Sereda. You can go to see his work at davidsereda.net. The Enlightenment Evolution Hour is a part of the Enlightenment Evolution Network, and any of the work that's done on any of the shows here, each host has their own donation button if you want to give them. Nobody gets paid to do the show. They do it out of the love of their heart, because we want to share our hearts with you, but we also have costs to keep up to run this network. If you would like to donate for either the network or for this show specifically, you can go to trebchanneling.com. That's TREBCHANNELING.com. Go to the donate button under About Us, or you can go to the EEN Radio Network and go to the network button. We appreciate all the callers, all the people, all of the information, questions, and love that you share with us. And I just want to say that we are going to have Lee Harris from Lee Harris Energy on next week. He will be here to talk with me 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next week, Wednesday. That's 6 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time, not standard anymore. So that's Eastern Time at 9, Pacific Time at 6. And we will be able to take callers after I am done conversating and connecting with Lee Harris, LeeHarrisEnergy.com. And we will also be having some more guests coming from Relationships Reinvented. They are twin flames who are counseling other people who are going through their twin flame experience. They will be with us. The date will be shared very soon. For TrebChanneling.com, April 3rd, 4th, 5th, there is the Asheville 3-day workshop, an extensive channeling workshop. Go to TrebChanneling.com to the workshop tabs under events to look for that. I'm also going to be doing a live event in Kalamazoo very soon, working on something in the Netherlands. We are going to be doing a live event in Chicago next spring, and at the end of next summer, we will be doing the Channel Panel Part 2 in Los Angeles. So there are a ton of things for Treb Channeling in 2015 if you're interested. And with that, we are going to call tonight, guys. I love all of you guys. I appreciate your time, your energy, your connection to the Enlightenment Evolution Hour with your host, Rob Gauthier, and we'll see you next week. Love you guys. Bye.